Hey everyone, I'm back. Hopefully I'll have uploaded this around 2 weeks after my last video, keeping up with my 2-week schedule of videos. Obviously last time wasn't a cathedral video. As I said, I have other interests and I want to do other things, so I decided to casually break the 363 cup stacking world record. A truly amazing feat, I know. I encourage you to watch it if you haven't. Anyway, I'm back to ranking cathedrals this time. But before I get into it, since there are a lot of cathedrals this time around, I'm not going to talk as much about each one. I'm going to refrain from detailing everything in the designs and buildings, and instead just focus on specific features that I like or dislike. I'm sure you know by now what my tastes in church architecture are, given that this is the 4th time I've done this. Since this is also only supposed to be about the design of the cathedral buildings themselves, I'm no longer going to mention the history or story behind the cathedrals anymore, unless it happens to be really interesting or important to the design itself. I'll still include little fun facts at the end of each section, so if you ever wanted to know more about the history or architecture of these cathedrals, you should visit their websites. Almost every Catholic church has a page on their site that goes through a detailed history of the church, as well as its construction and architecture, and far more than I do here. This is just a very brief overview. Alright, that all being said, it's time to rank some cathedrals. I'm covering the New York province this time, which is all the dioceses in New York State. Like last time, if you're at all familiar with the New York cathedrals, in fact, if you're familiar with cathedrals in America literally at all, then you already know what the best one is gonna be. This is another one where the difference between number 1 and the rest is literally night and day. It's the most famous cathedral in the country, actually. Still, unlike New Jersey, most of New York's cathedrals are fairly large and much bigger spectacles than a lot of the other ones I've covered so far. That's because New York was once the Catholic Mecca of the United States. That was a different time. While that's no longer the case anymore, these cathedrals of the last 2 centuries still remain. So there are 8 dioceses and 9 cathedrals to get through, so let's get to it. Last on the list this time is Sacred Heart Cathedral, which is the mother church for the Diocese of Rochester. Located a few miles north of downtown Rochester in a residential district, this cathedral kind of stands out in that regard. Like, this does not look like a suburban parish church. This looks like one you'd find in the downtown or business district of the city, not surrounded by mid-century suburban homes. Still, I love the exterior of the church, whether it fits in its setting or not. The full-fledged towers are easily the best part. Now you might be looking at this photo thinking, the exterior looks amazing, how is this the worst cathedral in New York? Well, that gets answered the moment you step inside. Seriously, this has got to be the weirdest interior we've seen so far. The floors, walls, and ceiling all look nice, and they still remain from when the cathedral was first built, but everything else is just... why? Why are there chairs and not pews? That actually bugs the hell out of me. There's just no good reasoning for it. And the worst part, unfortunately, is the sanctuary. The first thing you'll probably notice is that the organ and choir area are located directly in the center where the tabernacle should be. Second, you'll notice that the altar itself isn't even in the main part of the sanctuary. It's a freestanding platform right in front of it. And then we have something that I have never seen before. The pulpit is in the direct center of the sanctuary, in front of the organ and behind the altar. Again, just legitimately, what were they thinking? The tabernacle, if you're wondering, does look nice, but it's off to the side. Now lastly, there's the bishop's chair. And let me tell you that this is, so far, the worst bishop's chair I've ever seen. It looks straight up like an office chair. There's no design, no crest, nothing. Obviously, the cathedral did not used to look like this. In fact, soon-to-be Blessed Fulton Sheen was the Bishop of Rochester in the late 1960s, and this was his cathedral. I won't get into his tenure as bishop, but I can safely say he would not be pleased with how it is now. I hold nothing back when I say that whoever was primarily responsible for renovating, quote-unquote, this cathedral was probably high while doing so. Did you even know there was a Diocese of Rockville Center? Well, there is, and it's actually a very large diocese that takes up all of Long Island. I actually sort of know someone who lives up there. Also, yes, Rockville Center is spelled correctly. They spell center with an E at the end. Anyway, here we have St. Agnes Cathedral, which is located in downtown Rockville Center. In fact, it's the only Catholic church in Rockville Center, as it really isn't a city, it's actually a village. Yeah, they do that on Long Island. Even though it's a huge metro area, it's officially called a village. Once again, the cathedral looks spectacular on the outside. It's definitely Gothic, but not over the top, and sometimes a more simple design works better. The inside is good, but definitely lacking compared to the other cathedrals here. Most of its high points are in the sanctuary, but I do like the Bavarian-style ceiling. And interestingly, the organ is off to the right instead of in the back, given that this is a traditional-style church. Now, obviously, the best part of the cathedral is the portico above the tabernacle. I love the painted angels and saints on it, and the crucifix above is amazing. The altar itself is good too, and I like that it matches the pulpit. The bishop's chair is okay, but I think it could be a bit fancier. Honestly, besides that, the sanctuary is kind of plain. I think some more statues or decor would definitely spruce it up, but it's definitely better than the last cathedral. We head right next door from the Diocese of Rockville Center to the Diocese of Brooklyn. Speaking of, did you know New York is the only city in America to be split up into two dioceses? There's the Archdiocese of New York, which we'll get to later, and the Diocese of Brooklyn, which takes up Brooklyn and Queens. It's actually the most urban, densely populated diocese in the US and the smallest by land area. Anyway, the Brooklyn Diocese actually has two cathedrals despite not being a dual city diocese. The Cathedral Basilica of St. James is actually the primary cathedral, and I believe it's the oldest and smallest cathedral in the state. You can tell because of its simplistic, colonial-looking exterior. We weren't building grand Gothic cathedrals yet. Still, even for its time and even today, it looks great. I love the gold-top steeple. While the interior is kind of plain like the previous ones, it does shine with its sanctuary. The portico is even better than the last one because of its marble pillars and gold dome. I always love it when the pulpit is round, although it does irk me that the presider's chair is in the center where the tabernacle should be. I will never understand churches that make that design choice. And the bishop's chair is a lot nicer than the last one, and especially nicer than Rochester's cathedral. Although for that one, the bar is on the floor. All in all, it is a pretty nice cathedral for a really large diocese, but there's a reason why they have a co-cathedral, which we'll get to soon. Alright, here's where they start to get really good, but some of the sanctuaries, well, you'll see. How many of you know where Ogdensburg is? If you do, that's pretty impressive. If you don't, like probably most of you, it's at the very top of New York, right along the St. Lawrence River, basically bordering Canada. I should make a video called How the Heck Is That a Diocese, where I talk about places that make you wonder, how the heck is that a diocese? That's exactly what I wonder when I look at the Diocese of Ogdensburg, because the city of Ogdensburg itself has less than 10,000 people. For reference, a parish in my diocese has 20,000 parishioners. Now, that's a massively large parish, but I just find it incredible that there's a parish sort of near me that has over double the population of a diocesan see city. Anyway, the Cathedral of St. Mary serves as the mother church of the diocese, and it does not fit in its location. It's located right in a historic residential neighborhood in an already small town. So yes, this behemoth of a cathedral sticks out big time. We also have our first classic Gothic twin spire design on this list, and I really love the front window. I also do like the fact that there's a small park in front of it, even though that's not cathedral property. Now, as I said, this is where they start to get good, and you can see that the interior is already better than the previous ones. The medieval French-style roof and walls are great and fit in with the architectural style up there, given that it's basically right next to Quebec. And we have the best floors so far, too. At the sanctuary, we have another portico. Actually, half the cathedrals in New York have porticos. Other cathedrals should take note. This is the best one yet, with its marble columns and vaulted roof, complete with its own spire. I love the wooden walls surrounding the sanctuary, although I gotta say I don't love that the main altar is made of wood. I've said before for cathedrals that they should be marble, with maybe a few exceptions. The bishop's chair is simple, but it fits in with the overall style here. All in all, this cathedral punches way above its weight given the city and diocese that it's in. Alright, these next two are honestly interchangeable. I couldn't decide which one I like better, so these spots can be flipped depending upon how you want to see them. But for this next one, we have the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, located right in the middle of downtown Syracuse. First of all, I love the location as there is an outdoor plaza right in front of the church. As for the building itself, it stands out compared to the other churches in the area. My favorite feature is the right side tower, as it looks exactly like a castle tower. It's very imposing. I also like that while the right side tower is square, the left one is round. While that may look unsymmetrical, it actually works. Now the inside is truly something to behold. You can immediately see the Italian influence, which is fitting because it's in Syracuse, New York. Yes, Syracuse, New York is named after the more famous Syracuse, Italy. Anyway, we see proper Roman pillars for the first time in this video, and I adore the ceiling. The wooden beams almost give it a Spanish look, but it's unmistakably Italian. And the stained glass windows above the sanctuary really stand out. Speaking of which, let's talk about the sanctuary itself. It's okay. Like Rochester's cathedral, the altar stands on its own platform in the middle rather than actually in the main part of the sanctuary, which I really don't understand, especially here as there's plenty of room for it in the main part. I do like that the tabernacle is where it should be, and the tabernacle itself is really fancy. But easily the biggest knock with the sanctuary is the pulpit. So there's the original massive marble pulpit on the right side of the sanctuary, but guess what? They don't use it, at least not regularly. No, instead they use that small portable wooden pulpit you see on the left side. That is criminal to waste such a magnificent pulpit. So yeah, that fact alone knocks it down. Lastly, the bishop's chair, while big and prominent, is rather plain. It's not bad, but it's not great either. It sucks because this is such a good cathedral in every aspect but the sanctuary. But unfortunately, the sanctuary is usually the most important part. We head east from Syracuse and go to its next door neighbor, the Diocese of Albany, to talk about this next cathedral, which also happens to be named Immaculate Conception. Now, I said they were interchangeable. I like the interior of Syracuse's cathedral better, but I like the exterior of Albany's cathedral better. Located sort of in downtown, but actually right on the edge of New York State Government's Plaza, this cathedral is so tall you can see it from the interstate passing by Albany. You take one look at this and instantly think it belongs in France or just somewhere in Western Europe. This actually reminds me of St. Paul's Cathedral in Pittsburgh a little bit, as it's basically the same exterior design, just much darker. Obviously, I love the twin spires, and I believe this is the first time we've seen actual flying buttresses on any cathedral thus far. Now, my one complaint about the exterior actually has nothing to do with the design itself. You may notice in the photos, the left tower is covered in construction paper, the windows are super faded, and a few are even boarded up. Well, that's because the exterior has been undergoing a restoration project for years. Literal years, and it's still not done. I'm not sure whether it's just lack of money or what, but since it's basically in mid-restoration and has been, it does affect how the exterior looks. Now, as for the inside, the nave is stunning. These are the biggest columns we've seen, and I especially love the detailing around them. But let's talk about the sanctuary, because genuinely, what the hell am I looking at? I'll tell you what I'm looking at. Nothing. Yeah, there is absolutely nothing in the sanctuary. I don't know if this was the result of Vatican II or what, But whoever's idea it was to completely gut the sanctuary like a fish needs to be struck down by lightning and completely obliterated immediately, because this is horrible. Now, as I have discovered, the empty space is where the choir stands, because the organ is in the sanctuary, as you can see. However, the cathedral does have a choir loft, which is completely unused. Now, to be fair, the altar itself, while being made of wood, is incredibly well designed, and I do like the gold statues that surround it. The pulpit is magnificent and actually used as the pulpit, unlike the last one. But the tabernacle is who knows where, but at least the bishop's chair is better than the previous one. Again, such a great cathedral that is completely destroyed by its sanctuary. And I actually think Albany has a worse sanctuary than Syracuse because, well, at least Syracuse actually has stuff in the sanctuary. It's kind of sad to say that a good chunk of the New York cathedrals have amazing exteriors and naves, but terrible sanctuaries. That's going to be the case for this next one as well, but trust me, the top two are totally different. Alright, we arrive in Western New York to talk about the third best cathedral in the state, and probably one of the only good things in the city of Buffalo. Located pretty much right in the center of town and a stone's throw away from the Canadian border, the Cathedral of St. Joseph is the mother church of the Diocese of Buffalo. So there's a lot of controversy going on with the diocese itself right now, and I'm not going to get into that. I will also only very briefly mention the time in 1912 when the diocese built a new cathedral to replace St. Joseph's, and the structure was so garbage that it required constant repairs to the point where in 1976 the Bishop of Buffalo just decided to say screw it and move back to the old cathedral and demolish the new one. Yeah, that was a whole thing that happened. Anyway, I'm here to talk about the architecture of the current cathedral, which is also the original cathedral. As you can see, the left tower has a clock on it, which I always love, and the right tower doesn't exist. Yeah, it was never finished. I don't really know why, but only one spire of the twin spire designed cathedral was actually completed. Despite all that, I actually like the exterior. The window design and arched doorways give it a castle-like appearance. Now on the inside, it might actually catch you off guard, as you'll notice it's a mostly white interior, something you may not expect after seeing the outside. But you know, it works here. It's not a bright white and there are color splashes around, which is what should be the case if a church has a mostly white interior design. I gotta say, I adore the rose window and massive stained glass windows above the sanctuary. They are stunning. As for the sanctuary itself, like most of the others, it was gutted sometime after Vatican II. Thankfully, it's not as bad as Albany's, though. On the upside, I like the pointed arches that flank either side of the sanctuary. You don't see something like that too often. The pulpit is very prominent, and the bishop's chair is actually really good. However, there is almost no decor. The tabernacle is off to the right, and the presider's chair is once again in the center where the tabernacle should be. If they just added a high altar, this probably would have been moved up a spot. But alas. Also, one last thing I'll mention, even though it doesn't have anything to do with the architecture, but I feel is worth mentioning, is the mass attendance. So, when I research the cathedrals for these videos, I always watch a little bit of a live stream Sunday Mass. Usually to get better viewpoints of the inside, but I also just want to see how Mass is celebrated. Now, this cathedral is pretty big, but yet, there are maybe 30 people total inside for Mass, if that. That's just really sad. That has nothing to do with the cathedral itself, but rather reflects the overall massive decline in Catholicism in upstate New York. As I said in the beginning, this was once a massive Catholic powerhouse in America, and it's really depressing to see not just the church, but these once powerful cities in this area decay over the years. I really hope something changes or we find some way to revive these places, because I like upstate New York. But now, for these last two cathedrals, we head back into the city. Welcome back to the Diocese of Brooklyn, and this time we're talking about the co-cathedral of St. Joseph, which is the first time a co-cathedral ranks higher than the primary cathedral. Located in Prospect Heights, just a block away from Barclays Center where the Brooklyn Nets play, this cathedral might just be the best looking Catholic church in Brooklyn. As I said before, the Cathedral Basilica of St. James is pretty small for such a huge diocese, so a bigger cathedral was needed. Rather than build a new one, because there's literally no room anywhere in Brooklyn to build one, the Bishop of Brooklyn petitioned Rome to have St. Joseph's Church designated as a co-cathedral in 2013, and it was. This one is much bigger than the primary cathedral and more beautiful too. On the outside you can clearly tell this is an Italian-inspired church, with the pillars on the front, the stucco roof, and the round-top open-air bell towers instead of spires. The inside is spectacular. The many colors all around the cathedral just jump out at you as you walk in. The entire ceiling is decorated with paintings, and the gold trimming around the pillars is incredible. And we have our best sanctuary yet. First, it has a portico, which is very prominent and gorgeous, especially since it's made of white marble. Second, if you look on the wall, you'll see paintings of various saints surrounding the sanctuary, serving as a cloud of witnesses to what takes place on the altar. The pulpit is grand and elevated off the ground, and the altar itself is incredible, and the tabernacle is exactly where it should be. All of these, of course, are made of marble. And lastly, the bishop's chair looks like a throne with the pointed roof over it. I would say this cathedral is a step up from all the rest, but there's still one that's even better. As I said, you probably already knew what the best cathedral in New York was going to be before you even read the title of the video. It's blatantly obvious, but at the top spot, we have St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is the mother church of the Archdiocese of New York. Located in Midtown Manhattan, right on Fifth Avenue, this is another one that gets tossed around as being the best cathedral in the country, and while that's debatable, this one probably has the best chance of objectively claiming that title. Certainly one of the largest, taking up a whole block just for itself. It's easily the most famous cathedral in America too, and by far the most visited. In fact, sometimes it's called America's Parish Church, a term coined by Cardinal Dolan, the former Archbishop of New York. But it's a phrase that fits, given how well known it is. To give one example, in Spider-Man from 2002, in the scene where Spider-Man saves Mary Jane during the Macy's Day Parade and they swing up to a rooftop, St. Patrick's Cathedral can clearly be seen behind them. While it may not be tall enough to be part of the New York skyline, it's an irreplaceable, iconic landmark right up there with the Statue of Liberty, Empire State Building, Central Park, the Freedom Tower, so on and so forth. More well-known world leaders, politicians, celebrities, musicians, actors, and even popes have been in this cathedral than every other cathedral in the country combined. Now, it's so obvious why it's the best cathedral in the state, so, like last time, I don't think I really need to talk about the architecture. There are so many videos that do it far better than I ever could, so go watch one of those if you're interested. So, I'll briefly talk about my own experience visiting back in June of last year. It was the first and only time I've ever been to New York, the city that is, and St. Patrick's was easily the highlight. I'd seen photos and videos of it many times, but nothing compares to experiencing it in person. It was one of those moments where my jaw literally hit the floor and my eyes darted around because every inch offered something to look at. I also noticed just how crowded it was too. I wasn't there for Mass, it was the middle of the afternoon on a Friday, but the cathedral was packed with visitors. I wanted to check out everything and I probably wouldn't have known where to start. I was there with a small group of young adults from my parish, and my pastor there with us had been to the cathedral multiple times before, and he gave us all a guided tour, stopping at every statue, image, and mural to explain its significance. We were probably in there for at least 2 hours, if not more. The newest addition to the cathedral was actually being worked on when I was there, and that's a mural around the entrance dedicated to New York's history of immigrants, a very fitting image for our time. On one side are portraits of Italian and Irish immigrants from decades past, and on the other, portraits of Hispanic, Middle Eastern, African, and Asian immigrants of today. The most prominent feature is a portrait of St. Frances Cabrini, an Italian immigrant herself and the first American citizen to become a saint. I wish I'd gotten to see this mural while I was there because it's so gorgeous. Lastly, I'll end this with possibly my absolute favorite thing about this cathedral, and trust me, this is pretty neat. So as I said, it's located on 5th Avenue in Midtown. Well, it's actually directly across the street from Rockefeller Center, which, if you don't know, houses NBC Studios. So that's where Saturday Night Live, Jimmy Fallon, and other NBC shows are filmed. Well, in 1934, a statue depicting the Greek god Atlas, holding up the heavens on his shoulders, was built in front of Rockefeller Center, directly facing the cathedral. Notably, Atlas is struggling and using all his muscles to do it. Whether this was a jab at the Catholics across the street was unknown, but shortly after that statue was built, a small figure of the infant Jesus easily holding up the entire universe with one finger was placed inside the cathedral right above the entrance to the crypt behind the sanctuary. Of course, whether this was a jab back at the people across the street is also unknown, but I always love things like this. Yes, Jesus tells us to love our enemies, but that doesn't mean we Catholics will always take being made fun of. We will clap back sometimes. At any rate, this cathedral is one of the best in the country, and if you're ever in New York, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to make it a stop on your itinerary. Well, that does it for this video. This was a longer one, so it took a bit longer to make. Don't worry though, next time it will be the Hartford Province cathedrals, of which there's only 4. As for this one, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll probably do these cathedral rankings as an every other video sort of thing, so next video I make will be something else, and the next cathedral video will be after that, and it'll just alternate. As I said, I have other interests. Anyway, I don't usually ask for likes or anything like that, but if you did like the video, well, just click the button. It does help. And if you like the channel, subscribe. Again, it's just clicking a button. That's all I ask. I don't care whether or not you turn on notifications. I don't have notifications on for anyone I'm subscribed to, so I won't ask for that myself. Alright, that's about it. See you.